Hey, what's up? Welcome back to the Victors Podcast. I'm Jeremy Brown, and today's another special episode because I have again with me my brother, longtime Michigan State football enthusiast and alumni from the Michigan State University. So basically today, it's kind of a little special episode before the rivalry game, is how a lot of times people talk about how really anything can happen in a rivalry between Michigan and Michigan State, and it's kind of the opposite, because the last time it was truly an upset and on end of the season standards was 2001. So we're basically going to be going by cumulative, like, over the year stats, final record, and why at the time it may have been considered an upset, but actually in retrospect it really wasn't. So would you like to take off?
Yeah, and get us started. So we're going back to 2001 for the last game that we consider to actually be an upset in the Michigan State rivalry. Again, like he said, after the season, so looking back at the standings and everything. So in 2001, I'm sure Michigan State fans remember, as long as you're old enough or even just saw the replays, it was Clockgate. The last second smoker touchdown pass to TJ Duckett in the end zone. Was there a second left? Who knows? Who cares? We're not going to talk about that right now. We're just kind of establishing how far we have to go back to get a real upset. So to end that season, Michigan was 8-4 and 6-2 in the Big Ten. Michigan State was 7-5, but only 3-5 in the Big Ten. And Michigan was ranked 20th, while Michigan State finished unranked. Clearly, Michigan, was the better team that year. Looking at the end of the season, and Michigan State was able to pull the upset on a crazy end of the game.
And about Clockgate, we just watched the game before this, and I can say I don't even remember the game. I obviously wasn't born yet. But I can go back and say that, yes, there was a second left. Like, just watching it.
It was very close, but I think there definitely was.
Yeah, it was.
Like, and the only reason I really trust it, because I've seen a million people comment. I was just watching it. A bunch of people are commenting, like, I put a stopwatch to it, and there was .2 left. And it was, or I put a stopwatch, there was .1 left. Like, obviously, it was incredibly close, but
yeah.
Whatever it was.
But honestly, I've seen highlights on that game, but I've never really gone in depth into it or even thought about it, because since it was before I was born, I don't really know anything about the controversy. It's not like the 2016 Michigan-Ohio State game where there was a lot of controversy and I was living it, I was watching it. Like this, I didn't really know about it. And then watching it, before my brother even brought it up to me, I didn't even notice it until he said, oh, there's a lot of controversy behind it. I was just like, what? He snapped the ball and he got it off. I don't understand.
Yeah.
And then, going on to 2002, would you like to care to explain that season?
Yeah, so 2002, Michigan came back, probably upset about the whole clock thing. Just whopped us 49-3. Also that year, you guys were 10-3 overall, 6-2 in the Big Ten, and Michigan State was 4-8 overall, 2-6 in the Big Ten. Clearly on our way down. I think Saban's last year was before 2001 for sure. Bobby Williams took over, and they were definitely on their way down. And as we're going to see as we move through the years here, Michigan starts their period of dominance. So, yeah, go ahead.
So after the 2002 year, obviously, we go straight into 2003, and Michigan State was really good that year. They finished 10-3 overall, while Michigan.
Nope.
Oh,
You got it backwards.
Michigan finished 10-3 overall, and then Michigan State finished 8-5. That was a close game that year. Michigan ended up winning 27-20, but as we can see, that it wasn't an upset, and by the end of their standards, obviously, Michigan was a better team.
Through a couple years, Michigan also looks like they won the Big Ten championship that year. No upsets.
That was actually the last year Michigan won the Big Ten championship, so that was nice. A little bit of memories.
All right, moving on to 2004. Michigan wins this one, 45-37, high-scoring game. This year, Michigan is 9-3 and 7-1 in the Big Ten, tied with Iowa for the Big Ten championship. And Michigan State was only 5-7, so another obvious one. Again, through Lloyd Carr's years here, it's mostly just pretty obvious stuff.
And about that game, that was a huge comeback for Michigan. Michigan State had plenty of chances to seal the upset, but ended up Michigan coming back in overtime with Braylon Edwards, and he had a huge game.
Yeah, so I mean we've seen close upsets, but close to upsets. Just looking at end of the year standings still.
But overall history,
yeah. Moving on to the next year, it was 34-31 Michigan, another overtime game, and Michigan was 7-5 that year. Michigan State was 5-6, and Michigan State was only 2-6 in the Big Ten. So
yeah. So Michigan had the clear advantage. Michigan had the better team. But again, almost an upset. It was really close.
Yep.
So,
2006, Michigan wins handily 31-13. Goes 11-2 that year. Finishes number 8 in the country. Michigan State 4-8. So all pretty clear. 2007, Michigan wins 28-24. Goes 9-4 overall, 6-2 in the Big Ten. Michigan State 7-6 overall, 3-5 in the Big Ten. And this was D'Antonio's first year. This is his little brother year. This is year. Yep, Michigan beat Florida when Florida had Tebow. Michigan State made a bowl game, which is a big deal for them, but lost. I think that might have been Boston College. But yeah, anyway, I remember they lost.
Yeah,
because D'Antonio didn't win a bowl game for a few years there, but...
and basically that little brother comment kind of cursed us for the next years to come.
It turned the tides. And now we're moving in to the next segment of the video, which is Michigan State keeps winning for a while. Yep. So, 2008, Michigan State wins 35-21. This is the year Michigan was just absolutely horrible. 3-9 with Rich Rod.
Yeah.
It's obviously very scary for Michigan fans. New coach coming in 3-9.
Yeah.
Might feel similar for MSU fans. Tucker this year. We'll see as we go. But
I don't care. I don't think he'll ever be as bad as Rich Rod, because Rich Rod just brought the players he recruited and the type, like his coaching style, the new offenses just didn't work at all. Like completely, they just clashed with the previous recruiting classes, and it didn't work at all, and it was horrific.
Yeah, and it definitely was just like a change from the type of player you recruited before, and then even after back to Brady Hoke now.
Yeah.
So, all right, moving on to 2009, MSU wins 26-20 in overtime. This was that Larry Caper touchdown run in overtime game. MSU finishes 6-7. Lost their bowl game on a 6-6 year, but 4-4 in the Big Ten. And Michigan ended up 5-7, but 1-7 in the Big Ten. So, although that was kind of close, you still obviously give the edge to the team that won a bowl game. And we had a much better Big Ten record, so it was a little closer than past games, I guess.
Yeah.
But not
and
that close.
Both teams were kind of having down years too.
Yeah. So 2010, MSU wins 34-17. This was a very good year for Michigan State with Cousins. This is Cousins' junior year. They went 11-2 overall, finished number 14, 7-1 in the conference. Michigan finishes 7-6 and 3-5. I think this was Rich Rod's last year, and then.
And you know what? Rich Rod, unlike Brady Hoke, didn't regress as a coach. You watch. Okay, it's about a 2-game margin in 3 years, which is absolutely terrible of winning, and it's not good enough by Michigan standards. But at least he kept trying to build on wins from previous years. And Brady Hoke basically had a great year 2011 and then just dropped off in 2014. And that wasn't entirely his fault. That was kind of the QB's fault in 2014, but we'll talk about that.
Yeah, so moving on to 2011 now. This is the closest year, I think. This is very, very close. And a lot of Michigan fans, I actually remember before the bowl game this year, because Michigan ended up in the Sugar Bowl, Michigan State ended up in the Capital One Bowl playing Georgia. I remember arguing about how Michigan State should have had a BCS bowl and not Michigan. We're going to get into why in just a second here, but this is the closest year. So the actual game, Michigan State won 28-14, a couple touchdowns. So Michigan State finished 11-3, 7-1 in conference, and number 11 overall. Michigan finished 11-2 overall, so 11-3 to 11-2 Michigan was. 6-2 in conference, won the Sugar Bowl, finished number 12 overall. Now, Michigan State, again, it's very close, but the reason Michigan State had an extra loss is because they played in that Big Ten championship game and lost to Wisconsin. That's Wisconsin with Russell Wilson, Monty Ball, incredibly good. We also played Wisconsin during the regular season, and Michigan did not.
Yeah,
we remember
didn't play
arguing about that. Yep. So Michigan was very good that year. Obviously, it was Hoke's best year. The teams finished one game apart in the standings, but I think since they were in the same division, Michigan State won the division. We went to the Big Ten championship. We both won our bowl game against good teams. I think the edge goes to Michigan State there. Obviously, it's very close, but when we're going back all the way to 2001, and this is the closest you get. The teams are pretty evenly matched, but Michigan State gets the edge in the game, and that gave them the edge in the division.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Going into 2012, Michigan actually wins 12-10 for the first time in many years. Michigan ended up 8-5, number 24 in the country, and Michigan State ended up going 7-6, 3-5 in conference. Michigan obviously 6-2 in conference, and it was a bit of a drop off for Hoke, but 6-2 it wasn't bad for the conference games. It was just out of conference, obviously.
Yep, almost made the Big Ten championship that year. Nebraska was 7-1. So yeah, kind of up for grabs that year in division.
Yep.
And then moving on to 2013, MSU. Oh, so this is the year we sacked Gardner like a ton of times. This is our Rose Bowl year.
Mm-hmm.
Michigan State was just very good this year.
Yep.
Michigan State didn't even see it coming that year because going off the year before, we weren't very good.
Mm-hmm.
Coming out, we didn't know who the quarterback was going to be, if I remember correctly. Yeah, because this was Cook's sophomore year. We definitely didn't. Cook had played a little bit the year before, but I believe that was Maxwell who was just terrible with them. And then, yeah, Michigan State started picking up steam, and it actually really was the Michigan game where MSU fans realized, like, whoa, we could be pretty good.
Yep.
MSU won 29-6 there. Both teams were one loss coming into the game, I remember. But after that game, Michigan kind of must have lost a few to end the year, and MSU won out and ended up, winning the Rose Bowl. So that was our probably obviously the best year to be a Michigan State fan besides the playoff year. But then there's the whole Bama loss, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
2014,
another blowout by Michigan State.
Yeah, and this was Hoke's last year. Michigan was on the way down.
Mm-hmm.
Michigan went 5-7. MSU goes 11-2 this year. This was Ohio State's national championship year, so they obviously won the Big Ten. Yeah, good year for Michigan State. We beat Baylor in the whatever bowl that was, and down year for Michigan, and that brings us to the next. I guess it's kind of a change in the tides. Harbaugh comes in, but Michigan State's still good, so one of the only years where both teams are good.
And before we get into this kind of controversial game, I just want to go over something in 2014. So my brother brought up to me a good point earlier, and I kind of rewatched some of their game film and highlights. And Michigan's defense in 2014 was actually a very good defense. They were very good defensively, and they had good defensive recruits. If you look at the following ensuing 2015 and 2016 years, you actually see those recruits as juniors and seniors, and you realize how good they were, because even with Harbaugh's years, 2016 was their best defensive year, and they completely wasted it in 2014 with Devin Gardner, turnover machine, and he reminds me of Winston from the NFL and the Buccaneers. That's basically the equivalency. It was turnover after turnover in those games. So.
Yeah, he was like pretty good, but he just turned it over like a million times, and it just like lost them.
It was
so many games. I also remember going into the Michigan State game that year, being like, okay, Michigan's been really bad, and we were supposed to just kill you guys.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, he kind of like turns it over all the time though. Like, what if he just like doesn't?
One game. What if he like just doesn't turn it over?
Doesn't.
Like that's such a mood killer. Like turning it over, it's so huge. I think it happens in game, and you're like, oh, it's all right. But then once it happens, like say 2-3 times, it's a 5 point in college football. It's a 5-point swing. That's like the statistics for turnovers. So think about 15 extra points for the other team, and obviously Michigan State. I'm not trying to make any excuses, but we shouldn't turn over that much. Any game, any team.
All right. So moving on to the big controversial one, of course, the punt return, 2015. MSU. I don't think there's really an argument when you actually look back at the stand. I know at the time. Here's the thing. It's one of those at the time things where Michigan thought we won the game, we're better. Want to throughout the season, throughout the rest of the season, want to argue they're still better. But when you look back at the final standings, the only way you can really do it, trying to be unbiased, we had the better year. Obviously, we make the playoffs. We did get crushed by Bama, but I mean, we beat the biggest thing here is even after that game, we went into Ohio State that year. Well, they were number 2 or 3 in the country.
I still don't understand this.
And we beat them without Cook. I don't know how either. I thought there was no chance when I heard Cook was out.
Their defense that point, I thought it was astounding. Over. Your guys' defense was absolutely astounding.
Yeah, we just shut them down that game. But anyway, to finish the year, MSU was 12-2, 7-1 Big Ten. Michigan was 10-3, 6-2 Big Ten, and then we also beat Iowa in the Big Ten championship
and then
game.
We beat Florida.
Michigan State finished number 6. Michigan finished number 12.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, Harbaugh got his first and only win, beating Florida in his bowl game. But yeah, overall, Michigan State was just a better team, and there's no arguing against that.
And then 2016. Okay, so now the tide starts to turn back. So let's just get going. So 2016, Michigan wins 32-23. Oh yeah, we were just terrible. We were 3-9. Coming off the playoff, and Michigan goes 10-3, number 10 in the country, 7-2 Big Ten.
Arguably one of our best defenses of the decade, of the early 2000s, and I love that season. And that was actually a lot closer than I thought. Michigan State kind of came back in the end, and then it was like a second left, and they're going for 2, and then Jabril Peppers ran it back for, I think it was a touchback.
Yeah, I mean, if I remember correctly, though, we did kind of come back, but it was never when we were never like really in striking distance. It was almost like it was always still pretty unlikely.
It was always like
come back. We're never like that close, but. Because by the time we did score that touchdown to make it close, there was like almost no time on the clock. And then Peppers took it back anyway.
And the thing was, it was like 2 to 3 minutes left, and you guys need to get like 2 quick scores, and then that drive took forever. Mm-hmm. I remember that.
Yeah.
And especially when you got to the goal line, it just kept going on and on and on and on.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then 2017, MSU wins 14-10. Yep. This was a game in bad weather. This was another game where at the time, it was an upset for sure. Of course, I mean, we were coming off the 3-9 year, and it was definitely an upset at the time. Yeah. But then looking back at the end of the year,
we were number 7 in the country, right?
Yeah, you guys were top 10.
We came off. We beat Florida in the opener. We were 4-5-0, and we looked pretty good. And then obviously our quarterback injuries, and it's no excuse at all for losing that game. Michigan State was the better team, and actually ended up having the better season.
Yeah, the game itself obviously was crazy because neither team could move the ball.
Yeah.
There was all those picks, and then Michigan's, I don't know.
And then it came down to the last second Hail Mary. Yeah. And I remember at our house, my brother was with me, and the power cut out, but it was just the audio and the TV was on. But for some reason, the screen was black. Uh-huh. The screen was black, and then all we hear is the play ending. And it was honestly, if Michigan ends up completing that ball in the end zone, then we don't get to see it. Honestly, but hearing that would be awesome. Yeah. But obviously, Michigan State ended up winning. It was a cool game overall, though. Mm-hmm. It was sweet.
Yeah, yeah.
They did get postponed like 2 hours or something.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if we mention the records here. MSU is 10-3 overall. Number 15, 7-2 in the Big Ten. Michigan was 8-5 overall, 5-4 in the Big Ten.
And that year kind of angers me a lot because that 2017 Ohio State game was very winnable on our part, but John O'Korn, it was just like it burned into my brain. Down 20-24, there was a few minutes left. We were kind of driving down the field a little bit. I think we got a first down. He launches this ball to absolutely no one. The receivers, the ball was just snapped. The receivers were 20 to 30 yards behind, and he launches it to no one. Just goes right into the arms of the Ohio State safety. It was so bad. Yep. Let's move on to 2019 or 2018.
2018. Yeah. So Michigan wins. This is the game where Michigan State. I don't even want to know the total yard numbers, whatever it was. It was just 95. Terrible. Yeah. Michigan goes 10-3 overall, 8-1 in the Big Ten, finishes number 14. Mm-hmm. MSU 7-6 overall, 5-4 in the Big Ten. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was just.
You guys did have.
It was actually close for a really long time, though. I remember it was only 14-7 until. What happened when Michigan pulled away? Was it a Donovan Peoples-Jones touchdown? Or
okay, so earlier? It was 7-7, and then I think it was either the late second quarter or early third quarter.
It was third quarter when Michigan must have scored to go up 14-7.
Yeah, and then Donovan Peoples-Jones pulled away. He had the huge 70-yard touchdown, and your corner just kind of fell down.
Yeah.
And wasn't able to make the tackle. And then the first touchdown was a Ben Mason touchdown, and then I think the third was a Nick Eubanks touchdown.
Yeah, I think the Donovan Peoples-Jones touchdown felt like the end of the game because we just literally couldn't move the ball. So it's okay, now we're losing, so it's are we going to score?
You guys got the turnover. And then you guys had the cool touchdown where didn't you guys It was kind of like a toss back, and then he threw it to the QB in the end zone.
I think so. I don't even. To be honest, I don't even remember. I was actually, I was like working during the game and trying to catch it as I could go, but because I was on site somewhere else. But yeah, I do remember. I do remember how close it was.
It was a very,
for a while,
it was
unexpectedly.
very like very Big Ten game. If you want to like, just like pound the rock, pound the rock, pound the rock.
Mm-hmm. All right, and then moving on to 2019.
That was a fun game.
Yeah, really fun for you guys. Michigan just whooped us 44-10. 9-4 Big Ten. 9-4 overall. 6-3 Big Ten. Number 18. MSU 7-6. So yeah, you can talk a little more about that game if you want.
That was really a good game for us. Obviously, Shea Patterson was very impressed. First time all season in 2019 that he really, besides, you could say the second half of the Penn State game, and that was actually, like, if Ronnie Bell catches that ball in the end zone, we end up winning that game, that could be, like, the comeback game of the year, obviously, maybe of, like, years to come. Like, that would have been huge, because then we would have only had one loss. We just beat, like, a number 7 Penn State team, I think, and we would be going for the rest of the season, and then, obviously, we went out until the Ohio State game, and then we would have a similar situation to the 2018 team. Obviously, we get whooped by Ohio State again at home, but I think it would have been sweet, because then we still would have a little bit more optimism coming into that game instead of, no playoff chances, basically no Big Ten chances, except there's like this crazy mashup that would have happened, but it would have involved us beating Ohio State, which we didn't. But yeah, in this game against Michigan State, Shea really put up good numbers, way more passing. We saw a lot of speed and space, and it kind of showed us what Shea could do. But that was basically his biggest ups. Like that was the highest point he could reach as a player. So it was kind of bittersweet.
Yep, and yeah, so that finishes it out, obviously, as you've seen. I mean, really, in general, going back to 2001, usually there's a team that's significantly better.
Yeah.
There's, 2 or 3 years where the teams were pretty close, but for the most part, there's a better team, and the better team's always won. I mean,
yeah, and maybe it's retrospect, and maybe, like, obviously you can say, well, at the time we didn't know, and that's fine. But, like our main point is that it's not really anything can happen.
Yeah.
Always in the end, the better team with the better record wins. So it's not like you can say, oh, well, we were the better team that year. Like, no, according to all of the data for the past 20 years, this was the better team.
Yeah, and that's not saying it's impossible that there's an upset, coming up. There's obviously going to be an upset, and there will be, but...
Like, say this year.
But just looking back, and just that old adage they always say, like, oh, it's a rivalry game, anything can happen. But, like, just for this rivalry, we have not seen that happening.
And it's funny. It's kind of like, and honestly, any game, anything can happen. But it's kind of, like, strange, because this is a huge rivalry where it is usually close, but always the better team in the end always comes out winning. And the better team with a better record, which is kind of funny. It's kind of strange.
Yep.
So... that wraps up our video. Anything else you want to say on the subject? I think we covered it all.
I think we did.
All right. This is the Victor's Podcast. I'm glad to have you on here again. You had very good commentary.
Oh, thank you.
No problem.
Thanks for having me on.
No problem. It's always nice to have someone on from Spartan Network.
Uh-huh.
This is the Victor's Podcast. I'm JB, here with my brother. As always, go blue and go Michigan.
Go green.
Oh, no.